It's only been a couple of days since the last segment, but there were a couple things that I wanted to go over. Found out that we had a dead alternator. I can show you how to test that using cheap old multimeter. Had to relocate the vacuum canister. I'll explain why and how. And one question came up in a PM, how to properly bleed the air out of the coolant system. It's a problem, it's an issue, and it's not that hard to defeat. I'll show you how to do all three of those things. And then the next segment is going to be the rear differential. I was going to do a segment on axle seals, but I've got a Dana 44 rear axle. It's not really common. Most folks have the Dana 35 or Chrysler 8 3/4, and setting up the bearings on that is a lot different than setting up the bearings on a C-clip axle. So I'm just going to go ahead and go past that. My advice is if you have a Dana 44 and you haven't done it before, just farm them out. They're kind of a pain in the butt. But for right now, I was going to show you what happened. I knew that I had a dead alternator, but there's a way to test for that. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how. Using a digital multimeter, or you can use a regular analog sweep multimeter also. So first thing you want to do is take your little multimeter, go ahead and connect it to the battery, red to positive, black to negative, turn it on, and at 200 volts on DC we're looking at 12.2, drop it down to 20 volts, we got 12.25. Wet cell batteries can hold a maximum of 2.1 volts per cell, so that's 12.6. So that tells me the battery's still in pretty good condition. At least it's holding a charge and it's not fluctuating, as you can see. The real money shot, though, comes when you start the vehicle. You've all seen the little voltage meter on the dash, and that tells you quite a bit, actually. Mine was reading around 9. So took a look, and the way I knew my alternator was bad was I was still reading 12 volts when the vehicle was running. See, right now we're looking at 14.67, and that'll change slightly as you put a load on the motor. If you want to find out if your alternator is working properly, have a second person there, and go ahead and turn on the heater, or the headlights, or all the above, radio, everything electrical that you can think of, and see if your alternator comes back to the same range that it was before when you first started it. So, like I said, knew the alternator was bad. That was a quick and easy replacement. Next thing I noticed was the vacuum canister. We went ahead and went with a new front bumper. When we did that, the vacuum canister used to live right here inside of the front bumper. Well, obviously we don't have room for that now. It's real easy to relocate. If you just plain old ditch this and cap it off, all of a sudden your four-wheel drive on your center axle disconnect and your heater controls don't work anymore, so you have to have this. A couple things to keep in mind. The hoses for this thing are really, really brittle. You're talking old hardline plastic hoses, and they are really brittle, so you can't put too much of a bend on them. Otherwise they tend to crack and you end up with vacuum leaks. So as you can see, we went ahead and shortened them right here and kept a nice smooth radius in them all the way through. A couple things to check. You can make sure that your vacuum canister is functioning correctly. If you pop a line and you hear a hiss at all, then you've got vacuum, and it vacuum runs through the canister, so you're good to go. That'll tell you quite a bit. If you have a vacuum leak, what'll tend to happen is your idle will increase quite a bit. You can chase those down pretty simply by using a can of carburetor cleaner and spraying around your connections and seeing if you have a leak in any of these connections. They're all pretty old, and sometimes the rubber starts to rot or the lines get brittle. And it's really easy to chase down vacuum leaks on these models. So that was the second problem that we had to cure. I went ahead and relocated that, and the way I did it was I used the upper shock mount. Jeep did a pretty good job of providing you with a nice little place to hide this. As you can see, kind of. Well, probably not. What I ended up doing was using a piece of strap steel down inside of here, and just used a 3/8 bolt on top of the shock mount, and mounted that vacuum canister to a piece of strap steel, and then back on top of the shock mount. Makes everything a little tight, but you can still perform oil changes, and you can still get to your spark plugs and do basic maintenance. And the nice thing is, like I said, you still have vacuum. Now, with these 89 and older, I'm sorry, 91 and older systems, you have a coolant reservoir up here, but there's no way to fill the radiator on the radiator. There's no coolant fill down here. You actually fill through the reservoir. These reservoirs, they work fine, but one of the problems you run into is the front of the 4.0 motor is higher than the rear, quite a bit actually, and you'll get air pockets trapped at the back of the head. The easy way to bleed those off, let me go ahead and grab a drop light because you really should see this. The easy way to bleed those off is to get the back of the Jeep parked as high as you feel safe. A couple feet up in the air would be nice. And then while the engine is running, preferably cold, you don't want to do this hot, all the way in the back, sorry about the frantic moments here, all the way in the back, you can see a coolant temperature sensor right here, all the way at the back of the head on the driver's side. What you want to do is get the back end of the Jeep parked up in the air, start it up, get yourself a wrench, reach out back here and loosen this bolt slightly. And what will happen is you'll hear it hiss until it starts to flow a little bit of coolant, tighten it back down, and then what's happened is you've purged all of the air out of the back of the head. That helps out quite a bit. It doesn't produce any hot spots, and it purges your system a whole lot easier than the Haynes manual recommends. But a couple things to be aware of if you do that. Remember, you're working over the top of a spinning fan and a belt, so no loose clothes, no long hair, all right, guys? Like I said, going to be moving on to the next little project. None of these have really cost a whole lot, and I just ran the numbers, and come to find out, I'm only sitting about $1,400 into this Jeep right now, and just getting down to the short strokes. A couple little things to fix up. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a differential inspection. It's not voodoo. It's really simple. I'll show you how it's done. I went ahead and replaced the O-ring on the fuel tank. One thing to do with that is make sure you have a brass rift punch. No explosions, folks. So beyond that, we're getting pretty close to getting out on the road. A couple other things. Like I said, went ahead and sprayed on some rhino liner. The front end was not a matching color, and it was a replacement, so I went ahead and sprayed the rhino liner flames on it, and things are looking pretty good. It's running really smooth, and no issues coming up. So once that rear differential's in, I'm going to go ahead and go out and give it a spin and give it a try, and we should be good to go with this one. Cheap, easy, fun four-wheel drive for under $2,500. It can be done. Beyond that, all I'm going to end up doing is a little bit of spray paint here and there. I'll probably end up putting a roof rack on it, put the child seat in the back, and should be good to go. Should be able to take the family out to some pretty cool destinations. Until next time.